Hi, welcome to Love, Life, and Lies. I'm your host, Kevin Evans. Today we're going to talk about how to sustain a long-term relationship. Why do some marriages work and some fail? Today I have a good friend of mine, Tim Roberts. He was a business professional, actually is a business professional. He's been married for 40 years. He's got 5 kids, 8 grandkids, and just an all-around good guy. And wanted to talk about the sex of his marriage. Welcome, Tim.
Hey, welcome. Welcome to you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. So, when I was going through my marital issues before I got divorced a while ago, I was married for a long time. Never talk about the dates, but I was married for 23 years. And the marriage started falling apart. But I was speaking at a conference in Louisville. And I remember I sat down at a bar with a colleague of mine, and we were just catching up. And he asked me how it's going. And I said, well, the marriage is about to collapse. And he goes, what's going on? And I explained it to him. He goes, look, I've been married twice before. And my philosophy is that most relationships prepare for 3 things. First is you have like the honeymoon phase, where you get to know each other, you're dating, everything is good, everything is glorious, everything's fun. The second is you start raising a family. You try to have a kid, then you start raising a family. And you kind of get lost in that moment. The third part is after the kids are grown and go away, now you're focused on the relationship again. This is the person you could be drinking margaritas on the beach, watching the waves crash, enjoying the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. Everybody looks at the first 2, but they never prepare for the third one. And he said, that's where a lot of relationships collapse. I go, dude, you got it right. That really is what happened to us a little bit. And I think people get lost in elements of the relationship, but they don't water the relationship. So you've been married for 40 years. Obviously, there's been ups, there's been downs. Mm-hmm. When you're married that long, it's not smooth sailing all the time. So what are some of the secrets that you've gone through and what's helped you get through that? And some of your secrets.
Oh, wow. I don't know if they would be secrets as much as they might be considered cliches.
Okay.
I'm a little bit older than maybe some of the listeners that are out there. And one of the things that we did as a couple, and it really wasn't by design, it was by default, in terms of when we got into the kid raising phase. Okay, because we were in the honeymoon phase and everything was great. Okay, it was fantastic. We could not keep our hands off of one another, and we really, really were attentive to one another. But when we had kids, we didn't have any money, so our kids went with us everywhere, to the movies, to dinner. We hear people talk about, oh, well, we just need some adult time, or we need some me time. We didn't even think about that. It was more of an us time, and we had kids young, My oldest daughter is 39. She's about to turn 40. We were married at 20. By the time I was 21, I was a dad, and so our kids grew up with us, and they're our best friends now.
That's awesome.
And it's, if I told you some of the things that I used to say to my kids in terms of being friends with them, it would shock a lot of people. I'll just share one thing. I used to tell them, look, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm your dad, and I have a job, and that is to prepare you for life. Mm-hmm. Okay? And I will do everything fair and unfair to ensure you are prepared. I will not fail in this task.
And did your wife support you
in
absolutely.
That philosophy?
That's the key right there. That's
absolutely. The key. We were that, and I'm glad you said that, because we were always on the same page when it came to raising children and what we wanted together as a couple. Now, as our kids were getting older and we were transitioning more to a phase of they were kind of on their own, and we're talking about going to high school and then college.
Right.
You get into that phase of, well, it's just us now. The thing is that if you're focused on trying to get me time and you're focused on trying to get away from the role you have as a dad or as a mom, and let's face it, it's a role. We all have roles.
Right.
We're a role as a person, as a brother, as an employee, or as a boss. no matter what it is. We wear all kinds of different hats. But if you're trying to get away from that role, and I mean really trying to escape that role, that's a clear indication of there's a problem right there to begin with, okay? And if you're escaping and you can't escape together at the same time, okay, then that's another problem right there. We never had that issue. We always kind of liked the same things. So not that we process things the same way or see things the same way. In fact, we're incredibly different when it comes to that. Opposites attract, right? But Deborah has kept me grounded in many ways and kept me practical in many ways. So yeah, we shared the same things and we wanted the same things, and we just never saw it as something that we needed to get away from. And to this day, we don't see it as that. And because we were coming back to your point, because we were focused on having time together as a couple, okay. We used to have and still do date nights. You know, we would have date nights once a week, twice a month, you know, whatever we could fit in, because we were very busy. We have 5 kids, and we had another one that we raised, so it was 6. That was Vanessa, and so there wasn't a lot of time with sports and everything else going on. But anyway, so we would get away and we would make time for one another as a couple. As Tim and Deborah, the couple, okay? So there was always that.
But do you think that it sounds like your interpretation of me time is to get away from responsibilities, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're getting away from the responsibilities, because people can still have me time because they still have to retain their identity a little bit. They have to have their own hobby. It doesn't mean they have to have total separation. They can still, if the wife doesn't like golfing and the guy does, great. It's okay to go out and golf, still be that moment of mental health kind of thing. And maybe the woman needs to just have some girl time, and maybe they talk about the kids. Maybe they talk about issues in the marriage or things they want to do, but you still have to retain your identity. So sometimes I don't think necessarily me time means getting away from responsibilities. It just means having that mental health break.
Oh no, I agree with that. But when and you can almost hear it we talked a little bit about subtext off camera, and subtext means somebody says something and there's a completely different meaning behind it. There's a deeper meaning behind it. And all too often with younger parents today, I hear, I need me time, and it's as if they want nothing to do with, it's almost as if having children, and we're talking about the children phase of the relationship.
Right.
It's almost as if having children is a rite of passage, in the same way that having your first drink, getting your license, all of that comes in, right? Okay, well, I'm going to get married now. Now I'm going to have kids. Oh yeah, now I got to get a divorce.
I agree. But is that more generational and more society? I think that really is the issue right now. They talk a lot. There's a lot of talk today about following your passions, right? Be passionate, right? Okay. Well, in terms of being passionate, I don't think there is the passion for commitment. I don't think there's a whole lot of grit in terms of the commitment to the relationship. If that makes any sense. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's my take on it. Doesn't mean I'm right. But.
Well, I mean, there's more static noise in people's lives now than there ever were in the past, with the social media, the internet, everything that's out there. And the way society is right now is do what you want. It's about you.
Right.
And there is no commitment. There's no commitment to, not just relationships, but it's even interpersonal relationships. I mean, I was talking about romantic relationships, but even friendships, duties to your job, to your country, all that has gone different. And I think relationships are just another casualty of that mental philosophy right now.
Yeah, I really do. I really do think that you're hitting on something right there. I think it's far bigger than the relationship itself, than a relationship between a couple or a man and a woman. But if the fabric of culture begins with the family, and I'm talking about a ecosystem, a society.
Right.
If it begins with the nuclear family, and if that lack of commitment or that lack of grit or passion toward commitment has faded, then the entire thing comes apart. If that is the link, that if one nuclear family to the other nuclear family, et cetera, and all of those shared values create a strong society, then I think that might be the linchpin and the whole thing falling apart.
100% agree, but it starts with the individual. You have to have some balls to stand up to this stuff and don't fall into peer pressure. And I think people just don't do that anymore. They go, well, they're doing it. Why can't I? Instead, it's like, you know what? Screw everybody else. I'm going to do my thing. I don't care what people think.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, there's nothing better than a good relationship. If you have a great relationship, everything else falls to the side.
Oh, yeah.
Because that perfect person, that partner in life, there's nothing like it.
I'll give you a perfect example. Okay, have you ever read the book The Speed of Trust?
No, I've not read that one.
Okay, it's fantastic. I highly recommend it to anybody. And in it says trust is a two-sided coin. Okay, on one side is competency, on the other side is character. If you have a competency trust issue, you can train that up. Or you can talk about it. You can get better at it. If you have a character issue, you almost cannot train it unless, like what we talked about off camera, the person really wants, really wants to make that change. So in terms of trust, one step further, it talks about trust in a relationship is like a bank account. Okay.
Yep. The emotional bank.
When you make deposits in the trust account. All right, you're great. You're in a positive balance, right? But when you screw up in a relationship, you start making withdrawals.
Right.
And if you completely ignore your account, all right, you're overdrawn. And there comes a point where the bank puts you on the what do they call it? Check systems. Right. Where you can't write a check, you can't even have a bank account.
Right.
So that's when you get in the four R's of a relationship: remorse, recrimination, revenge.
You want to avoid those. Trust me, you want to avoid those.
On a personal note, just showing, we've talked about things like, being your best self or trying to live up to an ideal, of who you really should be, being a paragon of excellence, so to speak. But last night, my wife and I were having a great time sitting on the sofa watching TV. And she made a comment about something with regard to the technical aspect of this show. And we have conversations like that all the time. And so I went, oh, really? And I picked up my phone to check more details on what she said. Okay. And she took it as if I didn't believe what she was saying. And she got pissed off, Kevin. I mean, she got really mad, and that comes down to communication models, right?
Right.
Representation systems, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I was not my best self because that triggered me. Okay. And I dropped an F-bomb. Okay. And we didn't say another word for the rest of the night. Okay. And till we went to bed. All right. And then we said goodnight to one another because we don't do that.
Never go to bed angry.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I've done it. It's not the best thing, it's not
healthy.
It shouldn't happen, but I'm not perfect and neither is my wife. But that comes back to something else. I want to make that point. But anyway, the point is that this morning, okay, I always leave early. I get up at 4:30 every morning and I do my thing and she leaves me alone. I go 2 hours and I get my head set straight for the day. And she had gotten up and let the dogs out and then she had gone to sleep on the sofa because she likes to do that. And so she was sleeping on the sofa and I went over and I kissed her goodnight. She reached up and she hugged me and she said, I love you, blah, blah, blah. And not that that's a blah, 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 but you know what I mean? Right. It was like, everything's over with. Came home today before I came over to visit with you. And my grandson was there and we played with our grandson together. And, it's not as if it didn't happen. Okay.
Right.
But it wasn't such a withdrawal on my part. Okay, that I overdrew the account, which comes back to saying, we were talking about people being, is somebody, can anybody be perfect? No, it doesn't matter in a relationship if you're perfect or your partner is perfect. The question is, because you're not. The question is, are you perfect for one another?
Right.
And can you strive to make that happen? So that's where that's at. But going to the third phase that you were talking about with regard to, am I talking too much?
No, that's why you're here.
Going to
saving my voice. I appreciate it.
Anyway, going to the third phase of it, when you're talking about you're going to be alone, and I can't say this person's name. Okay,
please don't.
I cannot. But a little while back, within the last month or so, I got a call out of the blue. Someone very close to me, someone I love very much. And he said, my wife just told me that she's done and she's leaving me. And I don't know what to do. And so got into this whole thing of, he told me that, he was not attracted to her anymore in a sexual way. And, there was all of that. And I said, okay, is there enough left here for you to continue? Is it time? Nothing lasts forever. Some things, I'm very lucky. I am very, very lucky. Okay. I am married to an incredible woman. My wife is, I cannot even express it. I can't find the words to actually describe the kind of person my wife is, at least to me. She's got her flaws, but in terms of being a wife, I hit the lottery.
Can I stop you for 1 second? I'm looking at you saying that, and I'm watching your eyes water up.
Yeah.
That's love, and that is what everybody strives for. And I won't say you're lucky, because it takes a lot of work. And I don't think you're lucky in a relationship. You may be fortunate to meet the right person, but two adults living together for that period of time takes a lot of work. There's a lot of ups and there's a lot of downs, and there's a lot of things that go into keeping that love going. And just watching your eyes as they watered slightly as you're talking about, that's love. And that's what everybody wants to. And that's why you're here, is to talk about, how did you get to that point? What are the pieces? Because I believe there's no perfect relationship.
And I agree with you.
I believe it's a fallacy, and people want this perfection that does not exist. The issue is, are you willing to accept 5% fault in that person, 10%, 15%? And what is that? Because it's weighted percent, right?
Interesting that you went with percentages, because I really believe that a marriage, in particular a marriage, okay, is a 60-40 relationship. You give 60 and you get 40. You take 40, okay? Give 60, take 40. And if your partner is giving 60, taking 40, there's a hell of a lot of love overlap there.
Yep.
Okay? You don't have to worry about it, because that's where the trust comes from, right? And if you can trust that the other person, there's a lot, if you can trust that the person sitting across from you, even in moments of disappointment and anger, and I'll take anger over disappointment any day of the week, but in moments of anger or disappointment, if you trust that the person is communicating with you or sharing with you in a way you may not appreciate in the moment, but they're trying to tell you how much they're hurt or uncomfortable with what you've done, how you've behaved, the current situation, whatever it might be. They're doing it out of a place of, hey, I love you. Where are we at? You know what I mean? And that's a big leap, man.
Yep.
That's a big leap. And you've got to be willing to take that. Okay? Because, people think that vulnerability comes after trust. It doesn't. It's hand in hand. There has to be vulnerability before trust. You've got to share a little bit of vulnerability in order to earn the trust.
I agree with that. Yes.
Okay. So not that you have to share your innermost your innermost doubts and insecurities on your first date.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's not what I'm talking
about.
Don't
do the dump truck on the first date.
And by the way,
do
do not do that.
No, it is not a good thing.
Do not do that. But
use a shovel first, not a dump truck.
Yeah, exactly. Don't show up and drop it on top of them. But if you're willing to take that leap of faith and give 60, and it's giving 60 in the person's love language, right?
Which, by the way, everybody should read that book.
Yeah, the five love languages. Fabulous.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. And if you get a chance, if you read anything, if you get a chance to run across the IC4, it's called The Individual Colors, created by Rod Hairston and Tanya Revere.
Okay.
Phenomenal insight into how your partner ticks and how you can coax and stoke the behavior that you want that will speak to you with your love language. Okay, it's amazing. Rod Hairston is a genius, and Tanya Revere is an absolute soldier when it comes to content creation of that type. Rod Hairston's the man. There's no doubt about it.
Haven't heard about that.
And Tanya's amazing.
So when you're talking about trust, obviously communication is a big thing there. And so there's a couple of pieces that, in my opinion, kind of go together there. You don't have trust, communications there. Conflict resolution is a big part of that too. Fight fair, because how can you have trust if you keep bringing up the same issue that you resolved maybe 5 years ago? And if it keeps coming up, that person's not over that. And don't bring that into a fight. Stick to the issue at hand and get that conflict resolution, and then agree to move on, and don't bring it up.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And in my experience, now keep in mind, okay, honey, if you're listening, I'm going to start talking about you a little bit here. Okay, so I'm sorry. I am married to a full-blooded Sicilian. Okay, so very passionate people in all ways. But my wife has a memory like an elephant. And she will, on occasion, bring that into the fray. She'll be the first one to do it. And I think, honey, that you know that. It's the truth. So, but she would laugh at that. But she, more so than me, because I can't remember what was said 5 minutes ago. Okay, I'm that guy. I don't remember. I only remember how she might have made me feel.
And that's what most people. That's most people too. They associate a feeling with a particular issue.
And I want to correct that because I want to say this: 100% radical responsibility. Okay, I take responsibility for how I feel. Okay?
And everybody should.
My wife has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So it's the meaning that I'm taking away from whatever it is that you could say something to wound me. Okay. And it's me that's doing that, okay? It's not you or words or anything else. It's me, okay? So in any case, the bringing something up that is not in the scope of whatever the offense is, the argument is, the discussion is, whatever it might be. Conflict resolution has to be a situation where you both agree that you're trying to actually resolve it. Okay, I know people who have gotten into knockdown, drag out fights, and I'm not even kidding. We are the only couple we know, besides one other couple, okay, that are still married. We are the two of us left standing.
It's a rarity.
Okay, and so, but I know people and knew people who had gotten into rip-roaring, everything but the physical side of it. And if you ask them why they got into the argument, they can't remember what their reason was. Because they're fighting just to fight. It becomes a situation where I'm just going to win. And that's where all of that stuff comes from, like what you're talking about, and you're absolutely accurate. Bringing in things that effectively, the 47 fallacious arguments, right? Red herring, straw man, all of these different things that come into play, all right, that people bring up. And that's just about winning. That has nothing to do with resolution.
It's either that or there's a big hurt that person's not over.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of that comes into play. And I had a couple staying here.
And they're not being honest with you or themselves about it.
Well, right. And they're not in the other person. Absolutely. I mean, conflict resolution is so critical.
Absolutely.
And fighting fair is so critical. But there's an underlying thing. If they're not giving up on that, there's a trust issue then. And that's where this all started.
Well,
It comes into trust because trust was broken somewhere.
Yeah.
Trust is easy to destroy. It's so hard to repair.
Oh, yeah.
It's so hard to repair. So don't fuck it up. I mean, you really have to be really careful with trust.
No, I'm in 100% agreement on that. The one thing I can tell you, okay, in 40 years, I've never cheated on my wife. I've never put myself in a position to cheat on my wife. I will not do it because I will not be tempted. I'm not saying that I never would, okay? If I was drunk, if I was high, if something happened, I am not saying that it couldn't happen. I'm saying I've never put myself in a position to do that, and I'll tell you why I have not done it. I come from a really rough neighborhood and not the greatest background. Okay, so and my wife comes from a really good family. Okay, they didn't want her to marry me. Okay, so I can tell you that in terms of lost my train of thought there for just a second, where I was going with that. God, I'm sorry.
Well,
where was I?
As you're telling that, it seems to edge on the theory of respect. You don't want to lose respect for somebody because that ties into trust. But they're all interwoven. I come from a very humble beginnings too.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about this. My winter boots were Wonder Bread bags over my shoes when I walked to school. I'm from Detroit. I mean, we had a 1,200 square foot home, 1 bathroom, 5 people. So it's not like I came to money by any means. And so trust and respect in the hood is everything because that's really all you have at the end of the day. You don't have a Rolex watch. You don't have fancy cars. That's all you have is your reputation. And I think that's getting lost. We talk about lost these days. Now you get into other things like, and don't compare yourself to other couples. Be your own couple. And people think, well, they're doing it. Why can't we? Don't do that. I mean, now there's jealousy, there's envy, a lot of things come into play. Be your best that you can be in your relationship.
Sure, the green-eyed monster.
But I also say respect boundaries too. I've been seeing a lot of lately couples where one person is checking the other person's phone on a regular basis. I actually had a couple staying with me for a couple of months. Oh, this is ridiculous. They fought every day. And the dude was always checking her phone because it was a trust issue, as it comes out, that they'd both had an affair way back when, and they didn't get over it. Or at least the guy didn't get over it. Mm-hmm. And ironically, he was checking her phone all the time, and she never checked his phone. So we were out on New Year's Day. They were in town staying with me for a while. And we were at this hotel just having some drinks, right? And she said, hey, let me borrow your phone. And she was checking something on the phone, not even looking at his stuff. And up pops up message from Ashley Madison. And, it's like, and she goes, what's this? She goes, oh, I did that as a joke. He did it that day because he was pissed. I was down in the hotel lobby having a beer, grabbing some lunch. And she had come down from her room and we were talking. And basically, she was talking to me about him and how to make the relationship better. He signed up for Ashley Madison because he was pissed off that she was down there talking with me. Here's the guy that was checking her phone all the time. And he signed up for Ashley Madison. Then he was trying to dismiss it. I'm like, dude, you got to own it.
Yeah, well, that's
you own this one. He's going, oh, well, no, they're robots. It's not real people. Why are you signing up for it then?
I'm not a psychologist, but I would have to say that's a lot of projection.
Yeah,
in terms of what that person might be considering doing or what they would think they would do in a given situation. Or what their intent would be behind it.
Well, she looked up his profile and said, oh, I'm single, I'm in town for a good time. So she read all of that, and I'm like, dude, you got to bail out of this one quick. Anyways, I just got divorced.
Yeah, and I just remember where I was going with that thing when you brought back trust into the situation. I was saying that I never cheated on my wife, and I never did anything in business that was really unethical or that could put me in a position to be questioned in that way. And the reason why is because to this day, I could not bear the idea of looking into my daughter's eyes, any one of them, and having to explain myself. I could not bear it.
But that also comes down to character, which you talked about earlier, which is very important. Now, something that's a big issue is intimacy, physical intimacy, which in the bedroom. And when you get down to it and relationships start failing, they blame, oh, we're not having a great sex life. That's an indicator of something bigger. And I can tell you, in my relationship, when it was ending, and I was loyal to my wife the entire time, we were having intimate relationships maybe twice a year for 3 years. And it's not for lack of trying, but when you get flamed enough, you're like, what the hell? And you just kind of start giving up. So why are you going to try to romance anymore? But it's a sign of a bigger thing. And ultimately, our relationship ended. And it wasn't because of the sex, although that was an indication of something bigger. And that's just my opinion, that there's something bigger in play. If that romance is dead, and it goes both ways, either the man's not getting some or the woman's not getting some, but how you're doing it, there's different elements to that, but you've lost that romantic interest, and that's usually a sign of something bad. And I think that's where affairs really start taking off.
Yeah, I think that there's been intimacy problems in our relationship, my wife and I, recently, and it's medical on my part more than my wife. But prior to this, there was an issue with intimacy in our relationship, and it had to do with me. Okay, for some reason, I started to get very nervous in the bedroom, and I don't even know why. And I started to what do you call it?
Premature ejaculation.
Yeah, premature ejaculation. I was having that problem. And I'm in my 40s. I don't understand this.
Right.
And I'm having this problem. And then I lost all confidence in the bedroom. I couldn't bear the thought of not being able to, it's sort of like having the yips on the driver. You know what I mean? Having the
Never
yips.
really heard that compared before.
I mean, honestly,
I got the dick yips.
Yeah, I got the dick yips. Yeah, it's like, how do you, you're so afraid that it's going to happen that you don't want to do it, okay? And you don't want to go through the pain of that. So I would do anything to avoid it. I mean, I would stay up till my wife fell asleep, on the sofa. I mean, this is like, I would stay up so that we wouldn't have that situation arise. I mean, no pun intended.
Wow, I wasn't even going there, but good job, touche.
But anyway, yeah, I would do that, and we went to counseling over it, and it just got in my head, and it happens.
No pun intended there either.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Thank you. But it happens, okay, to lots of men. And then the erectile dysfunction, that happens in your late 40s or whatever. I mean, you're such a stud. I mean, I'm sure that's never happened to you. But
no comment. No comment.
But there's that too. Okay, so and that for me that happened, and that was another medical issue that I didn't even know I had, and so it was compounding. It was a compounding thing. Now, those are physical aspects of things that lead to that. And it was really hard on my wife. Very sorry, honey. I'm very sorry. But it was very, very difficult. And recently, because of more medical stuff on my side, I'll just come out with it straight up, prostate cancer and the issues that came about with the treatment. It's like I have no libido. Or minimal libido, okay? It's like, you have the 5 movie star cheat list that, it's total sanction. If you, so I had, this is a funny story, but I said, okay, who's on your list? Carla Gugino is 1, Carla Gugino's 2, Carla Gugino's 3. So one day, real quick, my daughter calls me and she goes, Dad. I go, what? She goes, I'm downtown. I go, yeah. She goes, over at, I can't remember the name of that theater. They always have people in down there, the Palladium or whatever it is downtown on Congress. She goes, Carla Gugino is doing a red carpet event. She's right, you got to get down here. And I'm like, Angela, that's supposed to happen when, it's supposed to be a random thing. You don't cultivate the situation. Thank you very much. So anyway, that really did happen. But anyway, yeah. So if Carla Gugino walked into my bedroom looking the way she does, I very seriously doubt I would be interested. I mean, that's just the honest to God truth. And that's due to the treatment for the cancer. Okay. It's just, so there's situations like that occur. Menopause for women is one,
right.
Those are all medical. But when you don't have those issues and you're experiencing that in your late 30s, let's say you got married and, you're on year 10, you got married at 30 and now you're at 39 and you're not having intimacy. Okay. And it's not medical and it's not physical.
Bigger issue.
Bigger issue. It could be a lot of things.
I think in that case, we're talking about physical intimacy, which, I mean, if you're lacking that and it's not a medical issue, then emotional intimacy is missing.
Absolutely.
And that's the bigger problem. Funny story, you talk about the list. Well, my list of movie stars that are okay, it's like 400 people long, okay? So
you've got a bigger list.
But the funny thing is, so I had a person that was on my list. This is funny. I had a person that was on my list, my 10-person list. And
now it's 10.
I am not kidding. So we were at Esther's Follies downtown, right?
Okay.
I was with my ex-wife. At that time, she was my wife and another couple. In walks the person on my list.
No way.
She sits right next to me.
No way.
I grinned.
That's so funny.
Look at my ex. She just shakes her head and I'm going, yes, this is awesome.
Like, hey, sorry. You know the deal.
And so, so the show goes on. We all leave and she's out there. And of course, I got to talk to her, right? So I'm talking to her and my wife just is shaking her head, walking away. I mean, nothing was
nothing you could do.
It's just funny.
It's sanctioned.
So now my list is 399 people long.
Yeah, there you go. You got to cross that one off.
So, but I thought it was funny when you were talking about that. I was just laughing.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
It was just.
It's never happened to me. I've never met anyone on the list or anything like that, but those are fun things to talk about. But you're right. It's the emotional side of it. And, when you're, women, in my experience, having 4 daughters and a wife and going through watching the relationships and the discussions openly around my house with the girlfriends, okay, with all their girlfriends throughout teens, 20s, 30s, and my kids are going into their 40s now, okay? So watching all of that happen, I kind of have an indirect perspective on that. And, women in my experience, and by no means am I an expert here, and I'm not claiming to know everything, so please save the hate tweets for another podcast. Anyway, in my experience, women tend to, they're much more emotionally driven on the emotional side than men are. And this is very general. There's always outliers.
Of course.
And I've always felt like a woman's logic system are her emotions. That's how they process what they're feeling. They're going to feel it first, and then they're going to start thinking about how they feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and
in my experience, that's. I
don't necessarily disagree. I know there's a lot of studies on that, and I mean that's why the book, Men Are from Mars.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but yeah,
there's different processing. There definitely is a different processing that goes on. That's why a lot of women have a lot more emotional support than men do. Yeah, because men are taught in general not to share their emotions, and they keep a lot of things more bottled up. So whether it's true or not, I think outwardly it appears that way. I don't know. I think men inside still have the same emotions. I just think it comes out a lot less and is not more extroverted. It's just my opinion on that.
Oh, no, I think that, yeah, sure. I think that men experience those same emotions. I just, in my experience, men will think about it, but it'll be thought driven.
But I think
more
they're
than
taught,
it will be emotionally
but
driven.
They're taught that way. I think they're trained that way. They're supposed to be the strong ones. So they keep that stuff inside where, again, women in general, and I will say this is bell curve and just the lenses I'm looking at things. I don't want any, I am not a scientist. There's no studies to back this up. But what I see is women have that emotional support, so they're used to being able to let that out more easily than men, and so that's why the suicide rate among men is so much higher than women. Because they have to keep it bottled up. They don't have that emotional outlet. They don't have that emotional release, and they're always taught to internalize it. Yeah, exactly. So what I'm saying is that outwardly it appears that way, but I think they go through the same emotions and they hurt just as much, or maybe if not worse, because they're taught to internalize it.
Yeah, and what I was going to say was in relationships where a woman might say something to a man, and it might be like dropping, I don't know, a river stone. River stone, like you step across,
right?
You skip across the creek.
Right.
A man could say the same thing to a woman, and it would be like dropping a boulder.
Yeah.
In terms of how in terms of the impact it has on the person.
Well, I think, I've seen stuff on both sides. Again, bell curve, we know that. When I get into a situation,
by the way, I want to make something very clear.
Sure.
I don't mean to say that as a negative thing for women. I mean to say that as a negative thing for men. Men have to be very careful in the words they choose, and in how they frame something, and in how they approach something with their significant other. I want to point that out.
I would agree with that part, because from my experience and what I've seen in chatting with various women and men in general, that men are thought to be the protectors. There's a confidence that women in general look for, and those words hurt a little bit more because that's the person that's supposed to protect. So I think the bullet zinging through hurts a lot more.
Yeah, it hurts. It hurts them. And the other thing is, it also, if it continues, because perhaps after 5 or 6 years, a man might be, and I'm not saying this only goes one way, but I'm going to frame this as men, because I believe men should lead in the relationship. I that's just my belief. I think that men should lead. And I think that in my experience, while women do not want to be doormats, women want a man to lead. They want a man to make decisions. They want him to lead. They don't want him to tell her what to do. That's a difference.
Yeah, there's a big difference. I mean,
huge.
In my opinion, men should be the rocks. And
I think that's what we're saying the same thing.
To simplify it, men should be the rocks.
Yeah.
And that's why I've had a few, I won't say long-term relationships, but I will say mediocre length relationships. And when something happens that I am not happy with or that hurts, I clam up and shut down. And I start processing that internally.
Yeah.
So if I'm dating somebody and they see me in that quiet phase and they keep going, what's wrong? It's like nothing. I'll come out with it when I've processed it. I'm going through this mental checklist. I'm going through the mental checklist of like, okay, why did that hurt? Why am I thinking this hurts?
Yeah.
Did she mean it? Is there more meaning behind it? Am I just being ridiculously weak on this one? It's like, is there nothing there or why? And what led me to that? So I start going through my mental checklist of why does this hurt so much? Then I diffuse it mentally. And then I will talk at the appropriate time, say, hey, can we talk a little bit? And then I lay it out in a logical format saying, okay, earlier today, this was said. And then I will lay out my thought process of saying, okay, it hurt because of these reasons. I don't think you meant it. However, this is what I felt. And how can we prevent this from happening in the future? So I kind of go through that. And then I want to get to the end. How can we work toward that? And if that person dismisses it, saying, oh, that was nothing. Now we got a problem because you've dismissed my concern.
Well, see, you're the embodiment of what I just said.
Right, but I'm saying, but a lot of people won't do that. They just fire. And men and women,
absolutely.
Men would never fire out of anger.
Well, that's the sniping. That's the sniping of I want to win. Oh, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you right back. That's the sniping that occurs that I was talking about before, when there's this low level of trust that's in the relationship, when you're overdrawn at that point. And now it's just all-out war. Win at any cost. Destroy the other person. that's no good at all. It's never going
healthy.
to work. It's not healthy at
And
all.
it's not going to work in the long term.
And when I say men lead, okay, this sounds really bad, and I'm going to sound
you're
like
burying yourself. I'm telling you right now. I'm bailing out this one.
Look, no, go ahead. I'll stand by it. I think that anything with two heads in nature is a freak.
It's not natural. It's two adults living, and the way we talked about earlier, two adults living together is difficult. I don't care if you have the most loving relationship, it's difficult. There will be conflict. There will be problems. It's how you solve those and how you work through them that really determines the future of the relationship. And some people just marry badly out of the gate and they know it and they do it for different reasons. And,
I agree.
And I'm seeing a lot more of that these days, that there's no regard for the longevity of the relationship. They know they can bail out of it. And they know it's wrong out of the gate. For whatever reason, they marry or get into relationships for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, our marriage is more of, there's a modern relationship like what you're talking about, where there's it's a more of a partnership style relationship.
Yep.
And my wife and I, we have more of a covenant style marriage, wherein, I mean, for the most part, Deborah makes. In the household, Deborah makes all the decisions. Yeah, I don't bother decorating. I don't talk about it because that's her play. That's her nest. I don't mess around with that. Okay, I don't. I all of those things I don't try to get too involved in. But if it comes to a major decision on how are we going to do. Are we going to move to Austin, Texas from California? Okay. And once all of that's weighed and it's discussed and there are valid opinions put in, okay, and those are all considered, all right, one person has to make that decision. Okay. Now you can have agreement with it or disagreement with it, but in our marriage at that point, when I make that decision after everything's been considered, then the decision's been made, okay? And she can choose to follow or not. That's up to her, but that's how we do things.
But you have that agreement.
Oh, yeah.
That's the difference.
It's not like, okay, it's not like, oh, well, fuck you, Kevin, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Right? No, it's not like that. That's not what I'm talking about. Anybody wants to construe it that way, well, that's right. I mean, that's a complete distortion.
Right. And I think that's why I want to clarify that, because you had an agreement that this is how it operates, as opposed to like this way it's going to be, or hit the highway. My way or the highway. It's not what you're saying at all.
But I want to come back to the whole issue of two people living in the household as partners. Okay. Now, most of the marriages that I've seen fail have this arrangement. And I'm not talking about, when I say most, I'm not talking about a small percentage. And here's the reason why. I believe I am not an expert, okay? This is just my observation on things. It's because it becomes a competition. It becomes competitive.
Then that's not a partnership.
No, but by nature of today's culture, okay, it becomes that thing, okay? And I've seen it time and time again.
But again, when I was talking partnership, partnerships are very different animal.
And again, that's not scientific.
We'll have a business partner, and we have an agreement on how things operate. It's a partnership.
Yeah,
it's a true partnership. And what you're talking about is not a partnership. It's a competition. They're competing for the lead, and that's a different thing. A partnership is. I'm not saying equals, because there's always, in any relationship, there's always sometimes somebody has to take the lead because somebody's sick. There's always a balancing of it. And that's why I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
And so what you were talking about is not a true partnership, though. You're talking about just a competitorship.
Yeah, but I've seen that occur.
They use the word partners, but it's not. I mean,
correct.
And that's the difference.
That's the difference. It's like, okay, well, and this is, I don't understand. This is my money, that's your money. We split this, that. You're fucking roommates.
Right.
You're fucking roommates.
Exactly. That's not a partnership.
You are not. You don't have a marriage.
Right.
Okay. You don't have.
No, you're right. We're roommates.
Yeah, it's like you're fucking roommates that have benefits.
Sometimes you don't even have that.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. And well, if they're lacking intimacy
Yeah.
down the road, and I think that it makes it a whole lot easier to break away. There's nothing to unravel.
Right.
Okay. There is nothing to unravel.
And they know it going in. If they keep the separation, they know it going in.
It's called wiggle room.
Yep.
And we go back to one of the things we originally mentioned at the start, which was the grit and passion for commitment.
Yep. It's
Okay.
not there anymore.
You've got to have it. Okay. You've got to be willing to make that, to trust that this is good. It's got to be we before me.
Right.
And you've got to fucking mean it. And you've got to live that. And that, I'm not saying that you can't have, a savings account that you're like for instance, okay, I have a separate account, all right, that some Uber money goes into that pays for certain things that I like, okay? And my wife is fine with that. And my wife uses money to do whatever the hell she wants to do.
Mad money. Got separate mad money.
But if the shit hit the fan, okay, none of that would happen. Everything would be consolidated, and there wouldn't be like, I loaned you.
Right.
You got in trouble there a while back, and I had to put in $10,000 off of my 401k, and you need to give me that back. Now here, you need to give me that back, and I have heard that fucking language, and that's not good, man.
No, it's bad.
Is my language bad right now? I mean, is that like I can say that?
No, you can say that. Okay. This is not public radio.
Okay, so I don't. My wife and I, Deborah and I, we go, what is that?
It's just
we don't even get it.
Well, it's a different generation, and hey Tim, we're gonna wrap this up, but I want to say, thank you so much for joining me today. I think we had a lot of good conversation here, and the one thing I want to end this with is look, there's nothing like having a great relationship, but it takes work, and people just aren't putting the work in, and it all starts with you and an understanding of who you are, and if you don't know who you are, how can you love somebody else? So first of all, work on yourself.
I agree with that.
Know who you are, know what you want, and then take your time and wait for that person to come along. But if you have that person and you're in love right now, water the relationship. Even a cactus in the desert.
Are you saying be ruthless with yourself? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you know what? It's that's a whole nother thing. But we should, always water the relationship, work towards it, and just work hard at it. Read some books like The 5 Love Languages. Read that.
Sure.
And work on the relationship. But anyways, Tim, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm glad we met, and this has been a lot of fun.
And just remember, live, love, and enjoy life.